You've tried to change. More than once. You made the decision. You meant it. You lasted a week, maybe 2. Then one day you looked up and you were doing the exact same thing you swore you'd stop. Same argument, same avoidance, same 1 a.m. spiral. Same relationship dynamic playing out with a completely different person. And the terrifying part? You watched it happen. You saw yourself doing it, and you still couldn't stop. That's not weakness. That's not laziness. That's your subconscious loop running uninterrupted. And until you understand exactly how it works, it will keep running. Every day. Every decision. On autopilot, underneath everything you consciously try to do. By the end of this video, you'll understand the mechanism completely. And more importantly, you'll have the exact protocol to interrupt it. Let's go. Chapter 1. The 95% you don't control. Most people believe they are in charge of their behavior. They're not. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cellular biologist at Stanford, spent decades studying the relationship between conscious and subconscious processing. His conclusion was brutal. Roughly 95% of human cognition, decision-making, and behavior runs on subconscious programs. Not choices, programs. The 5% that's conscious, the part reading these words right now, is the part you identify as yourself, your preferences, your values, your intentions. The other 95% is a machine running scripts it downloaded before you were 7 years old. Think about that. The majority of your adult behavior is being generated by programming installed in a child. Before you could critically evaluate it, before you could consent to it, before you even knew it was happening. That child watched how adults handled stress, how they handled conflict, how they handled love and money and failure, and your subconscious copied it all. Verbatim, without filter, not because it was right, because it was repeated. Repetition is the only language the subconscious speaks. It doesn't evaluate, it doesn't judge, it records what it sees most often and runs that as the default. You are right now living out a behavioral script written by a child who was just trying to survive. And you've been trying to edit the performance without touching the script. But here's the problem, though. Most people, when they hear this, immediately try to think their way out of it. Wrong. The conscious mind cannot overwrite the subconscious through logic alone. If it could, therapy would take 1 session. Willpower would work. Knowing better would be enough. It isn't. And it never will be. Chapter 2. How the loop is built. Here's the mechanism. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California has spent his career mapping how emotional memory and behavioral pattern interact. The finding is this. The brain doesn't store memories the way a hard drive stores files. It stores them as predictive models. Every significant experience you've had, especially emotionally charged ones from childhood, gets filed not as a record, but as a rule. Next time this happens, do this. Feel this. Expect this. Neuroscientists call this a neural pathway. But the real word for it is a groove. The more often a thought pattern or behavioral response fires, the deeper and wider that groove becomes. Neurons that fire together wire together. Donald Hebb established this in 1949, and it remains one of the most replicated findings in all of neuroscience. Every time you respond to stress with avoidance, the avoidance groove deepens. Every time you interpret a neutral social situation as a threat, the threat detection groove deepens. Every time you self-sabotage at the edge of success, the sabotage groove deepens. You are not making choices in these moments. You are following grooves. The conscious mind presents you with the illusion of decision, while the subconscious already executed the outcome 300 milliseconds earlier. Benjamin Libet proved this in 1983. Brain activity associated with an action begins up to 350 milliseconds before the conscious intention to act. Your brain decided, then informed you. You called it a choice. It wasn't. Hit subscribe before the loop tells you not to. We're just past the halfway point. But here's the problem though. Knowing the loop exists doesn't break it. And knowing that your subconscious decided before you did doesn't hand you the override switch. So where is it? Chapter 3. Why willpower fails every time. Here's what the self-help industry sells you. Motivation, discipline, mindset shifts, better morning routines, vision boards, all of it aimed at the 5%. The conscious layer, the part that already lost control 300 milliseconds ago. Willpower is a finite resource. Roy Baumeister at Florida State University proved this in his landmark ego depletion research. Every act of conscious self-control draws from the same limited pool of cognitive energy. By evening, that pool is nearly empty, which is exactly when your worst patterns resurface. The binge, the scroll, the message you shouldn't send, the argument you promised yourself you wouldn't start. It's not a character flaw. It's a timing problem. The subconscious runs on a completely different energy system. It's automatic, effortless, and inexhaustible. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't run out, it just runs. So every strategy built on willpower is fighting an exhaustible resource against an inexhaustible one. You will lose. Not sometimes. Every time. Eventually. The people who appear to have iron discipline aren't using more willpower. They've restructured their environment and their identity, so the subconscious runs a different default program. They didn't beat the loop. They replaced it. But here's the problem though. Replacing a subconscious loop isn't a decision. It's a process. A specific, neurologically sound process. And almost nobody does it correctly because they skip the most important step. Chapter 4. The Interruption Protocol. Psychiatrist Daniel Siegel at UCLA developed what he calls mindsight. The capacity to observe your own mental processes without being hijacked by them. It's not meditation in the soft, vague sense. It's a precision tool. And it's the entry point to rewriting subconscious loops. Here's the protocol. 3 steps. Step 1. Pattern recognition. You cannot interrupt what you cannot see. For 1 week, you don't try to change anything. You just watch. Every time you feel a sudden emotional charge, a spike of anxiety, irritation, shame, or the urge to avoid, you write down 3 things. What just happened? What I felt? What I did next? You're mapping the trigger loop reward cycle that Charles Duhigg documented in The Power of Habit. Trigger fires, routine executes, reward received. Most people try to kill the routine without ever identifying the trigger. The trigger is the door. Find the door first. Step 2. The 90-second rule. Neuroanatomist Jill Bolte Taylor discovered that the physiological lifespan of an emotion in the body is 90 seconds. A wave of anger, fear, or shame moves through the nervous system and chemically completes itself in 90 seconds. After 90 seconds, if you are still feeling it, you are choosing to re-trigger it with your thoughts. You are feeding the loop manually. The interruption is this. When the trigger fires, do nothing for 90 seconds. Not suppression, not distraction. Just observe without acting. You are letting the chemical wave complete itself before the subconscious routine can execute. This single practice, done consistently, begins to decouple the trigger from the automatic response. Step 3. Pattern substitution. A subconscious groove cannot be erased. The neuroscience is clear on this. You cannot delete a neural pathway. You can only build a competing one that becomes stronger through repetition until the old one atrophies from disuse. This is why replacement behaviors work and elimination strategies don't. You cannot stop overeating through restriction alone. You replace the overeating loop with a competing loop attached to the same trigger, new groove, same trigger, repeated until the new groove is deeper than the old one. Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg proved this with his tiny habits research. Behavior change that attaches to existing triggers and uses minimal initial effort has a success rate exponentially higher than behavior change that relies on motivation and willpower. Anchor the new pattern to the existing trigger. Make it small enough that the subconscious doesn't resist it. Repeat it until it becomes the groove. Here's the thing though, you now have the complete picture, the 95% running on autopilot, the groove mechanism, why willpower is always the wrong tool, and the 3-step interruption protocol that actually works. But there's one final layer almost nobody talks about. Your environment is constantly re-triggering your old loops, whether you're aware of it or not. The people around you, the spaces you occupy, the content you consume daily, all of it is feeding either the old groove or the new one. That's why I made this video breaking down exactly how to architect your environment so it does the subconscious reprogramming work for you automatically without relying on willpower at all. If you skip that step, every protocol I just gave you will eventually collapse. Watch it next.